Right, welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here alongside Conor and Neville of RTÉ Sport Online. You can listen to us on RTÉ.ie, Spotify and Apple, and you can also watch every episode on YouTube and subscribe to the RTÉ Sport YouTube channel, where you can also get the RTÉ Rugby Podcast and the GAA Podcast as well as clips and match highlights. We're joined today by Paul Corry and David McMillan and journalist Jonathan Higgins, who has been following the end of the Women's Premier Division title race and the Cup semi-finals as well. But first, let's talk about the boys in green, who lost 2-0 to Greece at the Aviva on Friday, but won 4-0 over Gibraltar and Faro last night. And Conor, I mean, coming into this window, there was already a sense of limbo, and coming out of this October window, it's sort of the same feeling as well.
Yeah, there's a kind of a dual narrative because Stephen Kenny has galvanised a segment of Irish football, but I watched the game on Friday in Donegal. I was on a golf weekend, Raf. So we played the 55th best golf course in the world, which was great fun. I mean, I was so impressed with the course, I decided to donate a few golf balls to it. So, but you'll have to scavenge around the rough to find them. But we watched the game that evening in Donegal, home of Shay Given, Seamus Coleman, Packy Bonner, a million Celtic fans, and I was very struck by the apathy for the Greece game on Friday. We watched it in a pub, or at least I did, and very few other people seemed to be that engaged with it. I'd make a noise when something happened, and then some people would look around at the screen, and that was effectively what it felt like. A stark contrast with the rugby the following day. So yeah, it seems to be petering out, and it's probably to be expected given that the group is winding away. I'd imagine, I wasn't around for this, and nor were you, but it feels like kind of the end of the own hand era, sort of that kind of wasting away to an inevitable conclusion.
Yeah, Jonathan, I don't think you're of that age either in terms of being around for the own hand era, I presume.
No, that's just a memory now in the background. Maybe it's like one of Conor's golf balls gone, never to be seen again.
Yeah.
You are right though. I think like you have the opposite end of the spectrum really with Irish sport at the moment. Okay, fair enough, the weekend gone by, but prior to that, if you're looking at Friday night, it felt like a football game that nobody was interested in except to give out about afterwards. There was no hype, there was no general sports fan interest into it, and then you had the juggernaut that was the Rugby World Cup and the hype and the 4 years of hype and everything that came with it. It's just the contrast between the two has probably never been further apart, really, has it? And like, is that the caveat that we're looking at now, that Irish football is determined by the bandwagon supporters, or for want of a better word at times? I don't know, but we are in a place where we're a very depressing place. There's no way they're putting it. Even last night, like, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't type of scenario, really, isn't it? And I think it was touched on a couple of times, but the lack of any real celebration for most of the goals probably summed things up. It's definitely like, I felt for Stephen last night, even like when he had to kind of, I'm not sure, did he mishear Tony's question initially about, is this your last game? On a personal level, it was hard not to feel for him. It was probably the one time that he's probably shown a bit of the emotional, because he's usually quite blunt and abrasive at times, shutting down questions. But yeah, look, it's just a pitiful place at the moment, really, isn't it? And it's hard to see a way out of it, because I keep going back to the two things: it's players and who else are we going to get.
You mentioned Stephen Kenny's injury, so we're going to get Paul and David's assessment of the Gibraltar game, but let's first listen to the Stephen Kenny post-match interview with Tony O'Donoghue.
A professional performance, job done, 4-0. Were you happy?
Yeah, I think obviously the disappointment from the other night, it's important that doesn't erode the players' spirit, and I think they were very professional and worked the goals well. I felt some good football and well worked, good movement between the full-back swingers and midfield players, and good interchanging and good timing of the runs for the goals from the attacking players. So it was a good win, and in terms of scoring form, we could have scored a lot more, and these games can be difficult if you don't get the goals that you need, and it was important. So in the end, it was very comfortable.
You talked pre-match about passing channels, particularly on the left, but funnily enough, it was passing channels on the right that brought the reward early on.
Yeah, no, just speaking of Liam, and of course, Matt is a very intelligent player, Matt. He sees things and great way to pass, and so he linked it up well. They linked up well on the right, and obviously we got the 2 goals from that, so that was a good start for us.
Mikey Johnson was named player of the match in the end, and
was he?
yeah, and I always know that you do like a winger. He brought so much to our play, didn't he?
Yeah, you know, I do. I love wingers, absolutely. Adore wing play. Just so it's been to get him. That's his first start, of course. To get him, he needs to play matches. He's too good not to be playing football, and so it's it's great that he did well himself and Chidozie. So now all of a sudden it looks like we have wingers who can make an impact if Mikey can get game time, and obviously Mark Sykes coming on as well and in that position, and we have one more coming on stream. So we just need better options in those areas, and they're helping provide it.
You've done a few systems during your time. I mean, would the 4-3-3 be one you'd be looking to go back to against better opposition, you might say?
Yeah, it depends on the availability of players. For example, like we might look, the championship is just so relentless for players' games that, for players had hamstring operations over the year, which. Sometimes you look at France, for example, and they come, what their squad is. It's never a change. They never have anyone missing, or they might have one missing, or whatever. But then the championship is just so the more players you get in the Premier League, the better. It's 1 match a week, and you might play in Europe if you're at a top club. If you're not, it's 1 match a week, and it's less on the body. So the championship is just every 3 days, and the explosive players like Ogbenya, we missed him in the summer because he his hamstring. Callum Robinson hamstring operation. Callum O'Dowd, Troy Parrott. All hamstring operations, so it can be tough, relentless. So certainly, it's to have regular consistency in the squad would be ideal, and have that level and coming to that more options now in different positions. A lot of options at centre back and so forth.
Netherlands won late winner in Athens. How does that affect the group in terms of the possibility of a World Cup playoff, and how will it affect your approach to the game in Amsterdam?
At the moment, I'm not sure of the exact permutations. Post game obviously depends on other results. They're likely. It's still more unlikely than likely, and I think regardless, we have to go to Amsterdam and try and get a win if we can. I think obviously.
Is it in your thoughts at all, Stephen, that it might be your last game? The players, again, tonight have been so supportive of you and what you're trying to achieve.
Is tonight the last game?
No, if that the game in Amsterdam could be. Would that be in your thoughts?
Well, we have New Zealand after that. I think from my point of view, the games against Holland and France at home have been real good games. Real good games that we haven't managed to. We obviously narrowly beaten them both. And so we've got to go to Holland. Obviously, they need to win to qualify, and they're obviously very top 6 team in the world. And but from our point of view, we've got to get organised, go there, and put in a performance that gives ourselves a chance of getting a result.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that is Stephen Kenny speaking to Tony O'Donoghue and Faro, and that's after the 4-0 win over Gibraltar. And we'll come back to a few of those points because they're kind of relevant to both the Greece game, which we'll speak about in more detail a little bit later on. But first, I suppose, David, on the actual positives, which were the goals, and particularly the first two, because they seem to be almost carbon copies with Ogbene and Doherty linking up. And then the forward player, whether it was Evan Ferguson as centre forward or Mikey Johnston as the winger, cutting inside. Obviously, as a striker, I'm sure it looks easy from the outside for a layperson like myself, but I imagine that type of goal is actually a tricky one for a centre forward to kind of turn home.
It's probably a lot of what we haven't seen in the last couple of years. Obviously, the system we play with 3 at the back hasn't lended itself to wing play or combinations down the sides. And it was actually a really good play, I think, by Ogbene for the first goal. He kind of stands up 2 defenders and he nearly has to look back to Matt Doherty and say, come on, get on here and make an effort, get in behind. And Doherty does that. It's a brilliant ball from Ogbene. And yeah, it looks probably like a really simple finish for Ferguson, but it's a bouncing ball and he just kind of didn't even connect with it perfectly, but enough to get it into the back of the net. And Obviously good from an Irish perspective. The more goals he can keep sort of ticking along with, will help him grow. Obviously, he's still such a young player. We're expecting so much from him, but it's not easy up there. And even when you're playing Gibraltar, you're probably going into the game thinking, from a striker's point of view, I'm going to score a lot of goals, but it doesn't always work out that way. So it was great to get him on the score sheet. And I just thought in general, the game in isolation, I thought they can be tricky games. I remember I think it was Mick McCarthy's first game in his second spell, and we went to Gibraltar to kind of end the Delaney, and it was a real struggle to win 1-0, albeit on their AstroTurf pitch. But those games just can be sticky. So it was good to see us perform well and make a lot of chances. And obviously 4 goals on the night, but probably could have been a couple of more. And I think it was a performance like Friday night. The lads are right. It was a real, even in the stadium, just people were leaving after 80 minutes. It's kind of something I haven't seen in the Kenny's time. It really felt like there was nothing on the game, and the way the game went, it was a real dead rubber. And it was good just to see a little bit of positivity, albeit I know that the opposition obviously weren't of any sort of decent level, but to still go and just get some goals and put some positivity on it was good.
Yeah, and Paul, just as David said there, obviously it's a bit of a hiding to nothing against Gibraltar. I mean, you at the end of it, you have to put the performance in, put the goals past them, etc. But it doesn't really move the dial. But I wanted to come back to a point that Stephen made in the post-match interview there, and it's around how detrimental the championship is physically for the players. And I don't know, is that something that you kind of concur with?
Yeah, I mean, it's relentless with regards to the number of fixtures that you have to play. And he's right in saying that, there's at times 3 games within a week, and it's difficult to recover in between the matches that are played. But I mean, the players that he listed there, I think Callum Robinson was one, Troy Parrott was another. Didn't play a huge amount of games in the championship last year, either of those players. So it's hard to kind of link the injuries that they've had to overload on the body. So, I mean, his point around getting more players into the Premier League for me was probably more relevant. I think that is something that we are constantly striving to do, and the more players we have playing at the higher level, the better it is for our national side. And you can kind of see, even in Ogbene's performances, just the spring that he has in his step at the moment. He seems to have kicked on again in the last 12 months, and him playing for Luton, he seems to have forced himself into the starting 11, and just the exposure that he has playing against top class players in the Premier League every week is certainly kicking him on to the next level. Evan Ferguson's another. I'm not sure you can directly link the availability of our players to the number of players we have playing in the championship. It is relentless, it's very physical, but I'm not sure it's played at the same speed that the Premier League is. So yeah, listen, I found it a bit of a funny answer. I wasn't really too sure where he was going with that, but I think overall it was a relatively positive night for the players in particular. I don't think it does a huge amount for the overall squad, Rafa, or for Stephen Kenny's tenure, but I think it was important for individuals just to have a positive performance, to actually win a game, create chances and score a couple of goals. The more we can keep Evan Ferguson ticking over, the better it is further down the line. I thought Matt and Ogbene did really well down that right-hand side. Thought even on Friday night when we played against Greece, it looked like our only sort of threatening avenue down that side. So to see that combination was good. And then to bring the likes of Ryan Manning and Mikey Johnston in, certainly a positive. Jamie McGrath is a funny one for me. If you look at it, even Ogbene's situation, like he was brought in under Stephen, then he was cast aside, and then he's been brought in again. It has the same sort of feel with Jamie McGrath. Jamie McGrath was excellent if you go back 2 years ago when we played Portugal. And in certain games, he's been really good in regards to kind of retention of the ball, creating chances. And he has probably a bit more of an eye for slipping people in the final third that maybe a Malumbi or a Brown doesn't have. I can't really understand why he hasn't played more games within this group. The last game he started was against Gibraltar, and then he's been in the squads and hasn't featured in other games. So just strange how players like that have been cast aside and then brought back in again. But it's very hard to take too much from the performance other than sort of the individuals getting confidence back in that shirt.
Yeah, and before we, I suppose, talk about more negative aspects, which is pretty much the Greece result. David, just on Liam Scales, obviously his story, he's been playing Champions League with Celtic this year, having started his his professional career at UCD and then obviously going to Shamrock Rovers. It's a great story for him, and then I suppose getting his first couple of caps in this window. Yeah,
amazing story for him. Obviously, and I saw Brendan Rodgers' comments recently that he's kind of one of the surprise players he's ever come across. I think Liam himself probably wanted out of Celtic in the summer to go and play football. Didn't obviously expect he would get game time there with the competition that he had had obviously a good second half of the season with Aberdeen last year, and injuries at Celtic have sort of given him an opportunity to come in, and he's obviously impressing his manager at club level, and to be playing in those games in the Champions League, the likes of Lazio, things like that, it's a phenomenal level to be playing at, and it's very rare that now at the moment to have any Irish players doing that. So, he's the only one playing in the Champions League. And obviously on Friday night, he started at left back, and probably not, he's done that a bit. Even at Shamrock Rovers would have played the left of a back three, but, for Celtic, he's been playing centre half. So even for Stephen to take Nathan Collins off and leave Liam on was a big call. And, I thought he performed quite well on the night, and obviously a comfortable night the other night for him against Gibraltar. But brilliant story for any young League of Ireland player, starting out even at UCD like myself and Paul would have done to go on. He did so well for Shamrock Rovers, and now proving himself at the top level in the Scottish Premier League and in the Champions League, and to get those first caps, it's a real good story.
Yeah, now let's listen to Didi Hamann, and he was reacting in studio after the 2-0 defeat to Greece on Friday night, and then we'll discuss the Greece game after that.
But we talk about international football here. He's won, 5 in 27 games? People, 41,000, I'm not sure whether 41 were here, but it's 30,000 on a Friday night. They bring their hard-earned money here. They bring their kids here. They deserve better. They had nothing to cheer for the last 3 years. There was nothing to look forward to. There was I think the best result was probably a win against Scotland in the Nations League.
Yeah, the 3-0 match, yeah.
Yeah. So this is one game in 4 years? Are you kidding me? And now we're talking about maybe this guy staying on. Nobody wants anyone to lose their jobs. But obviously you get judged on what you do and on results and whether there's improvement. There hasn't been any improvement. He's been kidding the public for the last 3 years. He's been saying there's improvement, we pass the ball, we do this. Nothing.
But there's a lot of factors involved in that, but he did have a vision. He wanted this team to play.
I've got a vision, Dara. I've got a vision.
But he wanted his team to play in a particular way.
Yeah.
He didn't want to, and this led to a huge kind of, nearly every match was a referendum in how we wanted our team to play. Yeah. Did we want to play beautiful, attractive football, or do we want to go to kick and rush stuff? We knew there would be problems. We knew there would be issues with it, teething problems, all of that stuff. But it kind of divided Irish football right down the middle, and that division is going to be there tonight and in the morning and beyond.
Yeah, but how long has a kid teething problems? Not for 5 years. Because once you've got your teeth, it's done.
We've no Bonjela left.
Yeah, no, anyway, but I want to see successful football. Yeah. I don't care how they play.
Okay,
and people had a go at Mick and
O'Neill and Trapattoni.
Yeah, they had a go at them, but they went to tournaments.
Yeah.
This team is miles away from going to a tournament. They were third seed. They finished fourth. Now, next time they go in the World Cup qualifying, they won't get an easier group because obviously the ranking goes further down. And they played a team, they got outplayed, outfought today by a team that's 4 positions above them. And you've got to give the team the best possible chance to succeed. And if you see this is not working, you can't say for 4 years, I've got a plan. Well, maybe if the FAI ask him now, he might say, well, I'm halfway there, I need another 4 years. Now, do you want to let the people watch this for another 4 years? If you do this for another year, this will be empty. They can play against France or Germany. This place will be empty.
The thing that the fans they're voting with their feet, aren't they? They're not turning up with the Friday night or the weekend. The rugby's tomorrow. You come to Dublin for the weekend, support the boys in green, both soccer and rugby, and get really behind the nation. But you can see it's very flat out there. And then we talk about there's no sponsor at the front of the shirt beforehand. Does that all coincide with results and the person on the head of all that? So there's a lot of problems, and I think maybe finances. There's always been an issue with finances with FAI, so maybe they're handcuffed
over the last
with
few
that.
Years.
Yeah. So that's an issue also.
All right, so that is Shay Given there, and before that, Didi Hamann. I think also during the coverage, you had mentioned that, and Conor, that this was rock bottom in terms of Ireland's performances under Kenny. I think maybe Athens, perhaps, was that sense of rock bottom, or how do you see it?
Athens was probably more of a jolt because I think there was more expectation. This was kind of after the damage had been done, so I think people were resigned. I think before we go any further, the FAI need to hear Didi's vision.
Yeah, I caught that.
Before we make any moves, that should be a first order priority. People talk a lot about the style of play. I think it's dependent on the players primarily. I mean, I often wonder about this notion about going back to a sort of dinosaur, the pre-Kenny era sort of approach, and the Kenny era, whether it makes a whole pile of difference. Well, it makes a difference how the team play, but I mean, that's determined, I think, further back the chain in the development of players. I mean, I think there's a limit to what an international manager can do in a few days, and Kenny has possibly tried to do too much with the quality of players we have at the minute. I mean, I don't think we can play winning football playing this way. We also seem to leak goals a lot more easily than we did in previous eras. I mean, we used to be, I mean, I always think about Athens, you know, if Trapp had been Ireland manager going to Athens, I mean, he'd have got us a goalless draw, no problem, you know. That was his kind of raison d'etre. That was his speciality. And yet we kind of leaked so many chances in that game. We were lucky to lose 2-1, I think. Now, we could have scored late on, but we seem to be a lot more leaky. I think possibly for this group of players we have at the minute that have arrived at this point that our system has produced and that we've managed to procure, the next manager will probably look to shore up at the back and get a more solid foundation there, because I think we're leaking too much. And Greece wandered through us a bit too easily, I thought, in the first half. One of the most sobering things, incidentally, about the players is, you know, a year ago, Nathan Collins, after that famous goal in Ukraine and that series of fantastic performances in the Nations League in the summer of 2022, when he looked like he was going to be the central defender with the linchpin there for the next 10 years. And now we fast forward to now, and he's taken off at half-time against Greece and doesn't even feature yesterday. I mean, it's that's a bit worrying that he's gone backwards like that. Hopefully he'll reverse out of this run of form. But yeah, I think that the next manager will look to focus on the defence initially, I would say, and try and make us hard to beat again.
Yeah, because Paul, I mean, in terms of like the style of play doesn't really change on Friday night from what it has been. What did change, of course, was the formation and moving to a back four, and yet some of the same vulnerabilities. And I might talk about how we were countered quite easily a little bit later on, but some of the same vulnerabilities defensively were there, even though the system itself was changed and it was kind of packed with sort of midfielders and a couple of extra attacking midfielders in there.
Yeah, listen, we caught them on the hop probably for the first 5 minutes by playing that formation, and really, when you reflect on the game, it might have played out a little differently if we'd taken one of those opportunities that either Smallbone or Ferguson had, and maybe the layout of the game might have changed. But once Greece sort of got to grips with the four at the back that we were playing, they were able to dictate things. And I guess what worried me a bit on that night, we all spoke about how flat it was kind of entering the ground. The performance was very flat. I just thought we were very easy to play with or play against with and without the ball. Like when Greece had the ball, you know, you don't see any real sort of pressure on the team when they're in possession, particularly when in our final third. It seems very easy to play against. They always seem to have an extra man, get carved open on a number of times. Even if you look at the goals or the chance when Bazunu touched the ball over the bar, we seem to be chasing back, and we don't seem to have any sort of real pressure on the ball. And that's a big worry, because if you go back on previous years, at least we were a difficult team to play against and we kept a number of clean sheets. That seems to have gone out the door. And then when you look at us when we're in possession of the ball, I think we're poorly set up, if you ask me, and you could maybe lean on saying that at times we may be poorly coached. Particularly when our two centre halves have the ball, everything in front of us is so static. When you're up in probably the gods of the stands, you probably get a real kind of bird's eye view of it. Two centre midfielders, Brown and Cullen, stood still. Smallbone not moving. Ferguson wasn't moving. And then you had Jason Knight, who's not a natural wide man, or Bennick, kind of just static. And it's very hard as a centre half then to pick out a pass or play through the thirds like Stephen, I'm sure, would want to. And what ends up happening is goes into Brown or Cullen. Because it's so flat and because it's so static, there's no sort of interchange combinations. There's no ideas on how to create space. It goes back to the centre half. It goes to a fullback, and then that invites the press for Greece to then squeeze up the pitch and ultimately turn over the ball. So it's very hard to understand what it is we're trying to do both in and out of possession. And if you kind of rewind back to some of Stephen's earlier games, you always felt like there was a bit of an idea of what it is we were trying to do. So I don't know what's happened in that period of 2-3 years. Maybe the players have lost a bit of faith or a bit of confidence in the fact that maybe they can play that way and get results. Or is it a case that, listen, it just needs somebody to come in and put a fresh touch on things? Because at this moment in time, it is very hard to understand whether or not we're trying to play out, or are we trying to play off Evan and then win second balls and then begin our attack from there? There doesn't seem to be any sort of patterns to our game, and we're not creating chances against oppositions like Greece or Holland or France, and ultimately we're conceding a lot of goals. And when you do that, you ain't going to win a lot of football matches.
Yeah, and what you're saying about the engine room there, do you feel it's more a case that some of the players that are in there, that's not their natural game to build out from the back, and that's the issue? Or is it more just that actually maybe they have that in their locker, but it's not being communicated well?
I definitely think it's a balance of the two. We definitely don't have technical players who are going to go in and dictate the tempo of a game like other nations do. And maybe Josh Cullen is more of a six who's going to play in front of a back four and sweep up and cut out balls that go into centre forward's feet. That said, Josh Cullen's capable of passing the ball. I think Jamie McGrath, when he plays in there, is capable of dealing with the ball when it's at his feet and picking out passes. Like, anybody who plays in the middle of the park doesn't grow up or play in their team just to run about. At some point, you're going to have to put your foot in the ball and create a pass. But I just think even when our centre halves get on the ball, there's no sort of idea of what it is we're trying to do, how we're going to create that space, and how we're going to get a combination last Friday night between Brown, Cullen and Smallbone. There was nothing, absolutely nothing. Now, that does somewhat go back to the players, but I still think with the group that we have, and in previous games that we've played, we've shown a bit more, but that just seems to have been sucked out of us in recent times. And I'm not saying that you roll it out from Bazunu and play. There's nothing wrong every so often just turning the opposition and playing a little higher up the pitch. Once again, at some point, you're going to have to get the ball down and play and have little interchanges. We saw a small bit of it last night with Ogbene and Matt Doherty. Saw a small bit of that on Friday night when Ogbene picks up the ball and he's quite direct. But in regards to, particularly the middle of the pitch or even combinations off Evan, I'm seeing very, very little.
Yeah, and just on the defensive side as well, then where we keep getting caught on the counter, which is how kind of Greece cut through us on Friday night. Are we lacking a bit of athleticism and I suppose even physical size and speed in the centre of the park?
Well, Alan Brown, that's what he gives you in abundance. To be fair to him, he's very dynamic and athletic, and he covers the ground quite well. I think it's a case that at times we're maybe getting caught out on transitions whereby we cough up the ball and there seems to be huge gaping holes everywhere. Yeah, it's a hard one to kind of put your finger on too much, but I always feel that like when the other team are in possession of the ball, we're not engaging in a press. We're not sort of shuffling down one side to then try press the ball. It seems very easy to kind of get out and in between our players, and maybe little pockets of spaces are showing up, particularly in front of our back four. So I don't know if that's a case of, sitting too deep, or is it a case that there's just not great communication between the back four and the two in front? It's hard to put your finger on, but it does seem that whenever we're playing, whether it be in wide areas, whether it be through the middle, teams are carving us apart. And there's no coincidence when you rewind back through games that teams are scoring from outside the box because we drop deeper and deeper and deeper. And at no point does anybody seem to be engaging to go press the ball. Like, our fullbacks are probably a little slow to go press the ball. Our wingers aren't doubling up with our fullbacks to give them a dig out. Centre midfielders Josh Cullen always seems to be stretched. There seems to be so much space that he has to cover. And whether it be wide players dropping into central areas, we just don't seem to be able to deal with it. So there seems to be a disconnect, Raf, between our back four, our midfield and our forward players, both with and without the ball. And that would bring me back to what is it that we're trying to do? Like, I appreciate international managers don't get a huge amount of time to work with the team. But if you rewind back to when we played Greece away from home, we went to Turkey and we had 2 weeks and still no evidence of it. And I feel like we're kind of another couple of months down the line and still no real understanding of what it is we're trying to do, both in and out of possession.
Yeah, and David, I mean, you've played under Stephen Kenny when he was at Dundalk with great success, and obviously the rhythm of club management and international management in terms of working on specific issues within a team, it's a completely different animal. So in terms of Stephen and how he would deal with, say, maybe if there is a disconnect within a team and trying to solve issues when he was at Dundalk, like how would he go about it, and like how much time would that generally take?
I think one point to make is, I think Stephen's first year in Dundalk, they played a diamond. He then signed Darragh Horgan and I think Darragh Meenan and went to 4-2-3, and that was the formation that kind of stuck. I don't think he's ever been fixated on one formation, and that's the only way. I know people have mentioned, obviously, his time in the Dundalk generally was 4-3-3 when there were good runs in Europe, and so why didn't he play that with Ireland? I think anybody who looked at the Ireland team at least 3 or 4 years ago saw we had strong centre halves. You know, we'd Seamus Coleman and Matt Doherty. Matt Doherty was flying at the time. You had to try to get both of them into the team. I think generally it would have been accepted that that was the formation to go with. That maybe has changed over the years, and perhaps being international football, maybe Stephen was hesitant to change it because of that you don't have enough time to really get into the nitty gritty of formations. And if he's been doing that for 3 or 4 years, stick with it. But I think one thing about him is he wouldn't be afraid to make that change, but perhaps it was a little bit too late. I think from his time in Dundalk, it was all about the wingers getting forward, the fullbacks getting forward and overlapping the wingers and creating opportunities that way. And I think that's what we would have worked on all the time, how to get your wingers into the game. And that worked so well. It was kind of frustrating from my point of view, watching in, knowing Stephen and knowing what I felt could be achieved. And maybe we didn't quite have the wingers at the time 3 or 4 years ago to do that. And look, I think ultimately formations aren't everything. You have to accept, you play the way you do with the players you have available. And I think ultimately in the 3 or 4 years, we just haven't produced enough cohesive performances to Didi spoke about in the interview there, like our biggest win is a 3-0 against Scotland. That shouldn't really be a surprise for an Irish team to perform at home and beat Scotland 3-0, albeit Scotland are going very well. We were so close in many games to be leading Portugal and to concede 2 late goals and to lose that match. Even games against Serbia. I was looking back through the groups yesterday. We finished behind Wales, Finland, Scotland, Ukraine. We've never really put it up to bigger teams. And I think that would be the biggest disappointment is, to not be able to beat the team. Whatever about losing to France, I don't think. And I think even if this group, if we'd finished third behind Holland and France, I don't think anybody would have any qualms with that. It's the fact that we're way off Greece even. I think that's the difficulty for people to generally accept. And, we probably don't have the strongest Irish squad at the moment, but still you expect to be competing with teams like Wales, with Finland, with Greece, with Scotland. And the matter of fact is we just haven't done that over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and Stephen has also been very protective of the players. I think the players also, in the other way, it's been kind of mutual as well. They've backed him. But when there's mistakes made on pitch, how does he generally deal with those sort of situations? I know club and international are a very different animal, but generally, is it something kind of immediately dealt with there and then, or is it a quiet word?
Yeah, no, Steve. Like if there's issues on the pitch and people aren't doing what Stephen expects, he'll certainly let them know straight away. And he'd be quick to pull the video up and show goals and show mistakes and try and make sure they don't happen again. I know we've spoken there about not keeping enough clean sheets. I think that will, as much as he's an attack-minded coach, or, that would be his ethos, I believe. But, he still would hammer home the fact you need to keep clean sheets, and we haven't done that. And Conor's point's probably valid. We'd have gone away on trap and played a dire 0-0, and we'd probably all have given out about it. But ultimately, we might have been in the group till the last minute. So look, I think it's how we probably move forward here from the FAI's point of view. I think it was Shay brought up the point about the sponsor. I don't think the sponsor has anything to do with Stephen. I think he's been unbelievably well supported in the stadium. I think season ticket sales have been brilliant. I think generally attendances have been really good. He has that. That's the side of Stephen, his man management. He's kind of well capable of bringing a crowd behind him, and I think the country was behind him for a long period. But how the FAI move forward from this? I feel personally we're in a bit of a stalemate. It's a little bit like the Vera situation. Make a decision and let's move on, whatever it might be. And I think now, I know we have 2 games next month, but whether we wait to see those games out, hopefully, and make a strong decision then from the FAI's point of view, and season ticket sales and things are up for grabs again. Got my email the other day, so you need to make positive news stories to make sure that we don't lose any momentum, even though performances haven't been great.
Yeah, and I suppose a final point on all this, Conor. I mean, again, it's the looming Nations League in terms of the rankings to try and get into a playoff, and the match next month. I know you were looking up sort of the permutations of whether
Well, yeah, I mean,
whether losing to the Dutch would
here.
help us. But again, yeah, you texted me something there yesterday as well. But
I don't think it's a goer. I don't think it's
no, it's not a goer anymore. It's irrelevant because the Dutch are now in pole position for to qualify directly, so that takes it out of our hands. And the way it stands, at the end of the day, Albania and Romania doing well in their groups has been hugely detrimental for us. And then you're looking at Group D, where Turkey have qualified directly, which has again meant Wales or Croatia have to battle for the final automatic place, and then one of them has to go into a playoff then, and then they need Israel. We need Israel, I mean, to finish above Romania, but obviously the ongoing situation in the Middle East means Israel's games for the moment have been postponed, so we don't know what's happening with that. And then you need the miracle of Iceland beating Slovakia and then beating Portugal and hoping that Bosnia beat the Slovakians in their final group. So but again, even on top of that as well, then Norway would be the first beneficiaries. An extra spot opened up before us. We're not out of it, but it's infinitesimal.
Are you writing all this down? I mean, I don't know that.
I did a thesis on it last night, so I'm on top of it. But I suppose the final point, Conor, is that this all dates back to poor performances in the Nations League, and that is why we're ranked as low as 26th, and why I think it's a 0.01% chance of getting a playoff place.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it doesn't come down to us potentially losing to Holland, because people would have smelled a rat if that happened. If we'd lost in Amsterdam, what's going on here? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back. I mean, particularly the Armenia away game. I mean, if Ireland had won that, presumably they'd have been ranked. I mean, I'm not sure. No doubt you're going to tell me where we would have been ranked if we'd beaten Armenia or got a draw against Ukraine. Don't worry about it. But yeah, I mean,
I hadn't got to that point.
I mean, it was interesting. There was a burst of form in late 2021, and there was I know Stephen was touting the stat about how we'd lost one game in 10 or something around that time, which was slightly parsed and slightly selective stat. But yeah, and he kind of got the new contract on the strength of that and made this bold proclamation about us winning the Nations League group, which, look, I mean, I wouldn't criticize him for making the prediction, but obviously when it didn't happen, I mean, there can be little complaint about it afterwards when we finished third in the group and lose 3 of the 6 matches. Yeah, I mean, that was disappointing. I mean, we did have that Scotland performance in the middle of that, which struck me as a more up and at 'em kind of display from Ireland. I mean, I think we probably do play a bit better when it's a bit more of a high energy type performance. I mean, I think that is the way we could do it. I mean, listening to Paul talking about how when the game is very static and set, we seem to have no way of breaking through with teams. I mean, the ball gets into midfield and then it gets shifted sideways and it doesn't progress, and other teams then push up on us. And we seem to have the worst of both worlds. This approach, we're not breaking through anyone, and we're leaving ourselves more open than we had in previous time. But that Nations League will be costly, and it shows the importance of it, I suppose, ultimately, that we losing to Armenia. I mean, it felt costly at the time, and boy, has it proved it.
Yeah, well, we might get to Euro 2028, although again, UEFA haven't confirmed how the qualification process is supposed to happen, so we'll have to wait on that.
Maybe they'll hold it out for 3 of the hosts, and we just have to beat Northern Ireland and Wales or something.
Okay, well, at least there's something to hang our hat on. But Jonathan, we did want to also talk about the Women's Premier Division, because that has been confirmed in terms of who the winner is, and it is Peamount, champions for the 4th time and the 3rd time under James O'Callaghan. And of course, that was after beating Wexford 2-0. And then the other game at the weekend as well, Cork City beating Treaty United 1-0 as well. So let's listen to Karen Duggan first, and then we'll get your thoughts on this, Jonathan.
Karen, a massive congratulations. I suppose you're wrecked now after that big long season.
Yeah, it's been, I'd say, the longest season in history. I've aged about 20 years from when we first started pre-season, but it's all worth it in the end.
Talk to me a little bit about the emotions, I suppose, on the pitch there when everyone's coming together and just have finally got over the line.
Yeah, it was incredible. I didn't think I would be as emotional. I wouldn't really be known for that. But yeah, like you said, it's been a really long season, and every time we've come out this season, it was like we were playing for more than a win. You know, we know that there's a change in landscape in the league, and we maybe don't fit the brand because we're not affiliated to a men's team now. But Peamount United has always been a club that championed women's football, and no matter what the future holds, like, this is for everyone in the club, all the hard work they've put in. And if you even look throughout the season, all the players we lost, not at the beginning of the season, like injuries and stuff like that, it was the underage girls coming through. They were the difference in the end, the likes of Ellen Dolan, Freya Healy and Jess Fitzgerald. And I'm so happy for everyone in the club. Everyone deserves this, and like I said, it's literally for everyone in the club.
Did you feel like you had a big role to play in that, with the young players coming in and all your experience to try and nurture them and, you know, bring them through step by step to finally get to here?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think they're well capable. But yeah, I suppose my role has changed a bit. I maybe don't have the legs, but I still have plenty to say. So I'm saying, I've worked well with James. We kind of have a good understanding of what my role is, and basically it's just keeping them going, and like they do the rest. So they're unbelievable talents coming through, and they're certainly names that people are going to know about in the next few years.
You might get a rest now for the remaining games, will you?
Well, I'll certainly be taking training off this week, I tell you that much. Yeah, we're going to enjoy tonight, and we'll see what happens. Obviously, there's another break in the league, but we're going to look at it as 2 extra weeks to celebrate, to be honest. I think we deserve it.
All right, so that is Karen Duggan, Peamount United captain, also regular RTÉ Soccer analyst as well, speaking to TG Cahir after the win over Wexford, which of course confirmed the league title. And as you touched on there, Jonathan, they were coming into this season with the looming threat of Shamrock Rovers, having lost some key players like Anya O'Gorman and Stephanie Zambra to them as well. And yet they've actually sort of won this league at a canter.
Yeah, it's a remarkable achievement really for James and everyone at Peamount, because they did look like a club that they had been one of the mainstays of the women's division, as Karen has touched on there, but they felt like the rug was being pulled underneath them, and a couple of different avenues. It's first, obviously, the big game changer in women's football this year was not only the reintroduction of Shamrock Rovers back into the division, but also professional contracts being allowed. It felt like the two of those were almost, it came at the same time together, and that was a double whammy really. But it was interesting both in terms of the cup, which was Shels versus Rovers. We'll probably touch on that a little bit as well. But Peamount against Rovers as well. Shamrock Rovers would have taken a number of players from both the camps, who were predominantly the big heavy hitters in the game in recent years. But to do that and to win it in the style, particularly after some of the disappointments they've had in the last couple of years. Shels obviously won it last year. Did that big game out in Newcastle. Then you think back to a couple of years ago where Peamount had pretty much the celebrations done, and it was the Galway Women's FC at the time that stung them on the last day, and you had that crazy scenes where the trophy went from one side of town to another. But it's remarkable, and I thought Karen's interview was very notable there. Like, it's, as she's touched on, not being affiliated with a men's team seems to be the way forward. You look at what's happened, like in my own club of Galway United, the two coming under the same umbrella, Shamrock Rovers as well. That seems to be the way forward for the year, for the way the league wants to try and go. And there is benefits of having that synergy, and we've obviously seen the benefits in Galway in terms of shared facilities and the one club mantra. And Galway United has been a big success in the women's game this year, winning the All Ireland League, and then a pretty good showing in the first season. But Peamount felt like, I think it's important that they're not just pushed away, because as she touched on rightly there as well, the underage success and that conveyor belt, despite losing the big names like Anya Gorman and Stephanie Zambra, still not getting used to calling her that, but it's like to mainstays and other players to go as well, and to rebuild. And then Ella Dolan coming on scoring the victory there to wrap up the league. It's a huge moment, and that'll probably be the sweetest of the lot for everyone in Peamount. And I suppose Shels had the softener of watching the league title go, but still getting the victory over Shamrock Rovers. Again, you talk about the change in landscape. 5 out of the 6 that Rovers bought off Shels or moved from Shels to Tala, and played in that game. Only Abby Larkin, probably the most high profile of them all, who's since moved on, and still to get that result, that's another result that's, there's been touchy couple of games in the league recently between the pair, but to be back in it's so. I would love to have been able just to picture the emotions of the Noel King and the squad to know the league was gone. That, to be fair, they probably knew it was going to happen anyways, but to have that gone and then to win and get to the final in the manner that they did. God, the full spectrum of football emotions. We talk about the avalanche and the career belt that has been under Stephen Kenny, but football there on that day alone has just been a bit crazy, hasn't it?
Yeah, and you know, we're coming up to another international window for the women's as well. And as Karen Duggan mentioned there are a lot of young players coming through at Peamount, and I'm sure across the league. And you mentioned a couple of them there already as well. But who were the players that should be looked out for or sort of coming onto the radar at the moment?
Well, the goal probably highlighted, but Hannah Healy for Shels as well is another one. And Shels have done remarkably well. Like it's almost indescribable really how good Shels have continued to keep things going and continue to be at the top of like fighting for both titles. Like they seem to be continuously lose their players. It just seems to be almost not quite the model there, but they're able to react like other clubs would fall to bits after losing so many players, and it's happened regularly, and they're always able to get more people on board. Like particularly the Abby Larkin, the emotion of that, and you saw tweets and you saw a very public fallout from it to give the most hypo example, but how they're still able to keep the conveyor belt going. And that's the good thing about the league as a whole. I think it's been a real breakthrough for the league. I think qualifying for the World Cup has given women's football a public platform and maybe opened it. I go back to the start, the rugby versus football, but women's football has been the talking point in terms of general sports fans, particularly in the World Cup. And it's important now that the league will push on, and they seem to have done that. And it's great as well, without going over it again, but there's so many players in the Irish squad that have been in the league, and then quite recently, and there is that tangible there for fans. And there's so much talent come through. Look across the array of all clubs in the country. So that's really exciting. And well, though that the title is wrapped up now, there's still, the cup final to look forward to. That will be exciting. Athlone, pretty much in a year where you felt like they were going to push on after they were like pretty much went down the last day of under Tommy Hughes. They went down to the last day fighting for the title. Missed out on both trophies in the end, and then had a real fall off. And another one of the ex-Dundalk mafia there, Kieran Kilduff, as well, get things going, get into the final as well, and that's already going to be exciting. Finally, you'd imagine Shels will be hot favourites, but Athlone will probably have a bit of a spice. They've nothing left in terms really of the league. They're in 7th at the moment. They're already probably looking at the rebuild. It's another one of these clubs that the future seems to be a little bit exciting, unknown, depending on what way you want to look at it in terms of ownership and new investment, etc. But that's going to be a really exciting cup final to look forward to as well. But women's football is in a great spot at the moment.
Can I just ask Jonathan there, as someone who's followed it closely, was there a huge amount of hostility to Shamrock Rovers in the league this year that you? It appeared.
I don't want to speak as a public spokesperson for the rest of the league, but they did, and particularly I think the fallout was quite open, wasn't it? And particularly with Rovers, Shamrock Rovers, and that it changed. I guess it meant look, Irish men or women, Irish football is by and large is a pretty financially tight location. Really, you're like, how do you make money in Irish football? You probably qualify for Europe, or you probably sell your best players, talent through the academy. Aside from that, it's quite difficult. It's I think it's penny pitching quite around the league, and then Rovers haven't been able to offer full-time contracts, and for the two of them to align made life a little bit more difficult. And the fact then that they understandably were able to cherry pick the best of the talent, look at their two biggest rivals who they were able to take from. And I think for me, I know she's since moved on, but the Abby Larkin deal, to be able to take such a talent like that, you're talking about a genuine superstar and will be a superstar of the game, to be able just to move across town from one rival to another, I think really indicates that. And yeah, there probably would be a bit of hostility, but like, what's football without hostility at the same time as well?
Yeah, for sure. Now, the cup final you mentioned, Athlone Town, of course, beating Sligo Rovers 4-0 in their semi-final, and then Shelburne beating Shamrock Rovers 2-0. And the date for the final is the 19th of November, kick-off at 2 p.m. And also in terms of the men's Premier Division, we've got Shamrock Rovers against Cork City on RT2 and the RT Player on Monday, this Monday coming, October 23rd. And St. Pat's against Shamrock Rovers will be on the same channels on Friday, 27th of October. And then the fixtures on the 20th. It's Derry City against Shelbourne, Sligo Rovers against Dundalk, UCD against Cork City, Bows against Pats, Shamrock Rovers against Drogheda. That last one is an 8 p.m. kickoff. That's this Friday. And then, of course, Monday, as I said, the Shamrock Rovers Cork City game being live on RTÉ. And then same time, both 7:30 p.m. kickoff, St. Pat's against Sligo Rovers. And Paul, looking at this, I mean, Bows and Pats this Friday, and also Derry Shels is going to be huge for the battle to finish in Europe.
Yeah, not only that, we'll get a bit of a rehearsal ahead of the
final.
Final. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out. I mean, Bows have been particularly quite strong in Dalybourne Park in recent months, and they seem to have picked up a bit of form. Even, you know, the likes of Dylan Connolly and Ali Coote seem to have really picked up in recent weeks, and that's kind of boding well when you've got somebody in such red hot form as Jonathan Higgins. So I'm sure they'll be trying their utmost, Raf, to kind of just continue that good run of form that they're on at the moment, and it's going to prove like a massive game in the run-in for Europe and that third spot, because if either of those sides were to potentially lose on the weekend, and if Shels were to pick up at 3 points, it becomes even more interesting again. So it's probably a game that if you're Jonathan Daly or Declan Devine, you just don't want to lose. Just kind of nab your way a little closer to that third spot and hope that, you know, Shels drop and the 4 teams pick up European football. But it's also one where you want to bring as much form as you possibly can into the FAI Cup final at the end of the season. So it'll be a really tricky game. I actually think the two teams are quite even. I don't think Pats have played particularly well in recent weeks, but have managed to pick up results. The FAI Cup semi-final will be the perfect example of that, and it will be interesting. I would fancy Bows, to be honest with you. I think Bows are probably in a little bit better form. Jonathan Higgins just gives them a chance in every game they play, and with that home crowd and the momentum that I think they have behind them, I think that could be a game where Bows could come out on top.
Yeah, and David, I mean, for Shamrock Rovers, there's a possibility they could be sealing the title live on RTÉ next Monday when they play Cork. But first off, obviously they have to get past Drogheda this Friday, and Drogheda tend to be a bit of a bogey team for them. So it's obviously going to be, even though it's a Tala, it's going to be tricky enough.
Yeah, I think the teams lower on the table probably cause Shamrock Rovers more bother this year than the ones higher up. You know, they've struggled against Drogheda, against Cork, and even obviously a draw with UCD the other week. So, but you know, they're 4 points ahead with a game in hand. You know, 4 games for them to go. I think the title is all but sealed. And although their results against Drogheda haven't been great, I'd probably expect them to go and win on Friday. And if that doesn't seal things, then yeah, I'd expect by Monday they'll have it wrapped up, and they've been nowhere near their best this year. You know, they've been much better in the last couple of years prior to this one, but they're still going to win the title. And I think whenever they needed to put in a big performance to just keep their head above the rest, they've done that this year, and they'll be worthy champions, albeit they haven't done it in the same style as they have probably in the last 3 years.
Yeah, and in the first division, obviously, we're coming up to the final round of fixtures in terms of the league season, and we know the playoff dates already, and most of the teams that are going to be in the playoffs are confirmed. Obviously, Galway promoted already, Waterford in taking second place, Cove being third as well, Wexford taking fourth, and then the last spot to be decided is Athlone, who occupied the final playoff place, but Longford could help deny them, and also that would open the door for Treaty United more likely, but also even Bray Wanderers mathematically as well. But interestingly, Conor, Athlone are playing Longford in the final round of games, and as a proud Longford man, I'm sure you know, you'd be well, not you yourself, but I mean your fellow county men and Longford Town fans would be willing Athlone on to finish the job and take that final place.
Midland solidarity has never been much in Everton.
So I expected, yeah.
No, whether they're able to or not, I don't know. I mean, it's a tall order to miss these playoffs, that Longford appear to have managed it this year. I thought they might get a special dispensation for being the only team to beat Galway in the league. Not once, but twice, in fact. So yeah, that was the only bright spot of an otherwise grim season. Maybe denying Athlone and sickening them like that will be would be something else to add to take from 2023.
Yeah, and I suppose for Paul, Waterford will be waiting to find out which one of those teams, whether it is Athlone or whether it is Treaty or even the more unlikely Bray Wanderers getting that 5th place. But they themselves have been, their form has been a little bit up and down in recent times. I mean, just looking at their run, defeats to Galway and Cove recently, and then draws with Kerry and Wexford, and the only victory punctuating that was a 3-0 over Longford. So Waterford will be favourites to go through the playoffs once it starts, but it's their form would need to pick up.
Yeah, you'd still have to fancy them. You probably think that once Galway pulled away, that maybe there wasn't a huge amount for Waterford to play for, in the sense that they were never really going to be caught from behind and they weren't going to be able to catch Galway. But everything we said about the FAI Cup final and heading into that with form and momentum behind you is absolutely the case when you head into playoffs. How many times do you see it within playoff situations whereby the team who just manages to scramble their way into the final playoff spot causes a massive sort of curveball and beats the team who finished, whether it be 2nd or 3rd in the division. So it's one where if you're Waterford, you just want to really focus on your last fixture and make sure that you do everything you can possible to set yourself up for that kind of semi-final game. And listen, if Treaty were to nick that last spot, they're coming in quite good form. They've won a couple of games in recent weeks. I'm sure they wouldn't mind taking a pop off Waterford, but you would still, just looking at the teams and the players that are involved in those squads, you would still fancy Waterford to come out of that 1st division side. Whether or not they'll have enough to beat, which is likely Cork, we will wait and see. But it is one where their form has been patchy of late. You just want to get things right this weekend and then focus on the next game ahead. But don't be surprised if there is a bit of an upset in those playoff games. There typically is. Whether that be Waterford or one of the other sides, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, and while there was plenty of takeover talk over considering Manchester United and stuff happening over in the Premier League, over here there's actually been a couple of movements as well. So Treaty United, there's a Canadian investment firm called Tricorps Pacific Capital who are taking joint ownership, and that story was broken by David Sneyd in the 42.ie last week. And the key figure here is current Treaty player Ciara McCormick, who is going to be a co-owner of the club, and that will also make her the first female chief executive in the League of Ireland. She's Canada born, but was previously capped for the Republic of Ireland. And then Drogheda United also have provisionally accepted a takeover from the US owners of Walsall, the Trivela Group. And David, having been part of a club where there was a takeover with Dundalk and Peak Six previously, maybe the Drogheda case is probably the more interesting case in terms of this multi-club model. And I suppose it's going to be interesting to see where the League of Ireland clubs fit within that model, because of course usually there's like with Shelburne and Hull City, that dynamic is kind of interesting to watch. And I suppose with Drogheda and the other clubs they're going to be attached to, that's going to be interesting to watch as well.
Yeah, hopefully it works out for Drogheda. I mean, I know when Peak Six came into Dundalk, there was a lot of scepticism, and probably rightly so. And I think it'll be the same in Drogheda. And I think a lot of League of Ireland fans have been burnt badly in the past, so it's probably good that people go in with their eyes wide open. And in terms of the model, I think it can probably work out reasonably well for Irish clubs. Like if you look at even Shels, and their kind of link up there with Hull, they've probably benefited from that with a couple of loan players. And I think ultimately League of Ireland clubs are going to lose players to the English leagues. And if you take Jack Moylan, for example, he's still going to move, whether that's to Hull or to Lincoln, obviously. So be it. He's going to make that move eventually if he's performing well enough. So having that link to clubs in the UK can hopefully benefit Irish clubs in terms of getting players. And I'm sure that's the way Drogheda will obviously be looking at it. And I think financially it might help them out from where they've been. They've obviously Kevin Doherty's done an incredible job there. He'd be crying out for investment to build on what he's achieved so far. And I said, hopefully it's a good news story, and we're not looking back in 3 years or 4 years like we might have been with Peak Six.
Yeah, and I almost forgot, Jonathan. Obviously, we were talking before the semi-final, the FAI Cup semi-final for Galway United, but obviously Bohemians bet them in that, and obviously, well, Bohemians that were down to 10 men. But in terms of the mood in Galway now, with there's obviously just the one game left, and obviously would have been great for the club, I'm sure, to get to a cup final after waiting so long. But I presume everything is still sort of extremely rosy, regardless in terms of the mood and everything else.
Oh, it very much is. It's in the midst really of planning the presentation on Friday night now after the Wexford game. Certainly been a long time coming around. I think the Bohs game was maybe a little bit of not quite a reality check, that's too strong a word, but it shows the gulf between the two divisions, and it shows what improvements will be needed for Galway United next season. I think there's multiple examples of teams that have come up and almost come straight back down again if you don't invest, and not just investment in terms of financial, everything to get right, because there is a big step up and it'll be even more difficult next season. Now, I better correct you before I get lynched back home. Ruth Fahy was CEO of the Galway Women's FC for some time as well, so she had that role, so I'll be lynched if I don't put that one in. But yeah, no, it's exciting times. It's going to be, you imagine it'll be busy now. Should be big celebrations. The only positive thing to come out of the defeat to the All Blacks, it means that we've a clean run. It would have been a direct clash with the semi-final, so no excuses for everyone around Galway to get down for the presentation. But yeah, no, it should be exciting. It's certainly a long time coming. I know the '93 team are due to be down there as well, which is a nice touch. But yeah, there's no the thing about it is with football, there's no time to be emotional. I imagine it'll be have the celebration and then get planning for next year. What will be a big jump up in class and get so things right. The playoff fixtures as well. Just to touch on that as well, I was down in Treaty on Saturday for that game. I think they're a little bit off. It was quite funny at once, not quite funny, but it shows again the emotions of football. At one stage, Galway were winning comfortably 2-0, and then Treaty got one back. And at the same time, they were still celebrating that goal, and it was read out in the PA system. The result, or the Athlone being trailing Finn Harps 4-0. So there was a moment of hope there and excitement that is playoff football. Ultimately, Galway pushed on, but the Longford result against Bray, like Bray should be coming into this last round of games here now, having a chance. They got caught. Was it 96? Conor, you'll probably correct me there. The late equaliser for Longford, and it looks like Bray have blown it there now. They would take a bit of a unique circumstance of results. I suppose they do have an outside chance, but Athlone they're in free fall at the moment, as are Waterford. So if Athlone do come in, it's going to be quite the challenge. You'd imagine Cove will be Wexford in the other one, but I still think whoever comes out of that will be too short against Cork ultimately. But playoff football is it's so exciting to look forward to. And as a purely biased maroon tinted glasses, I'm just glad that Galway United aren't in it for once after all the heartbreak in recent years.
Yeah, so obviously we'll see how that all plays out on Friday. And also just wanted to mention thoughts with the family of former Ireland and Brighton striker Jerry Ryan, who died aged 68 at the weekend. He would have won 18 Ireland caps in his time and scored the goal which sealed Albion's promotion to the top flight that season, and played in the 1983 FA Cup final against Manchester United. And later he would also be assistant to Liam Brady at Brighton. And that's it for this week's podcast. We'll be back next week. Remember, you can watch, listen, as well as subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And Jonathan, thanks a mil for coming on. Conor, same to you. And Paul and David as well.
Thanks, Raf.
Thanks, Raf.